Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I am joined by Brandon, also of Hail Varsity. I was going to say your last name and then I bailed out on saying your last name in the last moment. So that is where we're at on a Monday. But here we are for another recruiting question of the week. Brandon, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm doing well. If anyone is super interested in my last name, it's out there. It's on Twitter. It's on hailvarsity.com. You can find it.
You can find it. Actually, head to hailvarsity.com and read all of the content that we have, and you can find Brandon's last name there as well as mine. I actually originally introduced myself as saying Erin Sorensen, and I was like, that felt strange. So we just like to keep it more relaxed on this YouTube channel. But this week we are back to address sort of a question that no one really directly asked, but I feel like has come up in a number of conversations over the last week. And it's really about Nebraska's perceived placement in the world of recruiting right now. The 2023 class is much further ahead right now with 14 commitments than where Nebraska was in 2022. At this point, last summer, Nebraska was really kind of looking at like, what is this class going to be? What is the 2022 class even going to shape up to be? Obviously, we know the class itself finished out fine. The transfer portal definitely helped out significantly for Nebraska through that 2022 class and kind of like supplementing where they needed to get some bodies. But this 2023 class is really a different story. So Brandon, like knowing that we've already seen a number of experts nationwide talking about this, a lot of stories that have been written, what can we take away from Nebraska being at 14 commitments right now and being further ahead at this point in the year?
Yeah. Well, first of all, they are definitely further ahead. Grab the data on this. Use July 12th as a cutoff date. No specific recruiting significance to that day. Just a good day in my experience. 5 commits at this point last year. 9 in 2021 class. 9 in 20. 10 in 2019 and just 4 in 2018. So that was their first recruiting cycle at Nebraska. Well, no, actually, that would have been a Riley class. So strike that one. So 10, 9, 9, 5, and 14. The one that stands out there last year, obviously 5, which through all the recruiting restrictions that were in place during the pandemic year and even beyond, that one makes a bit of sense. But even in that context, 14 really jumps out. So I think there's a couple of significant pieces to that. But before that, maybe we should talk about why. And I think the calendar is probably a big piece of it. Nebraska also has some new coaches recruiting. How big of a role do you think that plays in getting to 14 already before we even hit August?
I mean, for me, I think Mickey Joseph is the like star of the show when it comes to what Nebraska has done on the recruiting trail. How many players have we heard of these 14 commitments who are like, he was a part of my recruitment? He may not even be the lead recruiter, but he's a part of it. He is actively speaking to players on both sides of the ball. He has communication with these players. That's the part that really stands out to me is it's like, okay, yes, this one player, his lead recruiter might be Brian Applewhite, but you know who else is talking with him? Mickey Joseph. There is something to be said about what Mickey Joseph is doing right now. And we've also heard similar things about Bill Bush. He has made significant strides. And I think you kind of have to look at, a couple of these coaches as like what they've been able to do on the recruiting trail for Nebraska so far. But the MVP in my mind has truly been Mickey Joseph. That's not to take away from Applewhite or anyone else and what they have done, but truly when it comes to what they've been able to do in the time they've had at Nebraska so far, Mickey Joseph has been the star, honestly, also with transfers. Like he has not only helped benefit Nebraska's 2022 class, but he's also helped benefit Nebraska's 2023 class so quickly. And that has to feel like a really good hire for Nebraska at this point.
Absolutely. And I think, that was a big, in addition to his ability and his long time in the game and his connection to Nebraska, all factors, but like he is known as a recruiting ace. And so far he's been that. Nebraska's most recent commit, Ashley Williams Jr., basically DN / linebacker from Zachary, Louisiana, which is in Baton Rouge Parish. So Mickey Joseph isn't going to work with him directly when he gets to Nebraska, but you have to think the familiarity there played a pretty big role. And just having, and I mean, not only was Mickey Joseph most recently at LSU, he's from Louisiana, and he spent so much of his career in the state of Louisiana, coaching, at Tulane for a bit and Nichols State. Like, he's been all over that state. So having just if you're a kid who's going to play defensive end at Nebraska from Louisiana, it's a big change. And just having somebody you quote unquote know up there being like, he's from where I'm from, I think is a big deal. So we're seeing this, even Mickey Joseph's kind of ability, the perks you get with him spill over far outside of wide receiver.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, just even looking at this list, I'm looking at Nebraska. So Nebraska has 14 commitments at this point, as we've said, but of those 14 commitments right now has ranked Nebraska 29th, according to 24/7's composite, just nationally. Obviously, there's a lot of room to still grow in this area. We had originally, if you had said a few months ago, what does Nebraska's 2023 recruiting class look like? And you had told me, well, by July 11th, there would be 14 commitments. I'd be going, well, that class is full. There's nobody else to take. They're looking at potentially going up to about 18 commitments, which obviously we know with roster spots says a lot of what they're expecting in the future, as far as what's going to be available, what's not. And so they're going to be pushing this class a little bit further than we were originally expecting. And looking at this group, I mean, it does have room to keep climbing in those recruiting rankings. Now, some people will tell you recruiting rankings mean nothing. They mean something. They mean enough when you need them to. And I think you could make a case for any of that. But Nebraska has definitely, for the people who are like, I want to see 4 stars, has brought in some 4 stars. I mean, you have a couple of 4 stars now, and one on the offensive side of the ball, one on the defensive side of the ball. And then you have a lot of really high 3 stars that I think when they get re-rated, they could potentially go into that 4-star area. And that's what's interesting to me, is kind of watching this class continue to evolve. Now, I will say you brought up that 2018 class, which I know you said was technically a Riley class, but I kind of have to talk about this, if we compare sort of where that last Riley class was before Scott Frost came in and took over, you're going into a season where people are going, we don't really know what's going to happen with this coaching staff. We don't know the metrics on Scott Frost's job. We don't know what's going to happen by the end of it. So you have this large recruiting class, and you don't know if it's going to, you do see a little hesitation. Malachi Coleman has said, I'm going to see the season out. He hasn't said it because of he's been just more, I want to see the season out. I want to see how things go. A lot of these players could have said the exact same thing. We could be sitting at having this conversation right now going, hey, there's a lot of prospects, but none of them have committed. It's really interesting to me how many of them have committed at this point, knowing that there's potentially a lot of uncertainty with Nebraska, and are, really truly buying into, again, I keep going back to Mickey Joseph, what these new coaches are, selling to them as far as what they see. So there's a lot of things that go into why classes ebb and flow, why some are this and some are that. But for me, it's really interesting kind of watching, wow, this is a lot of commitments for a class that, could make the argument of, we'd like to see things through.
Yeah, they really could. It doesn't seem, but like you were saying, but the fact that they're at 14 now, which is higher than I thought they would have been, going into the season opener, and there's still some time there to add potentially for this class. You don't get the sense of the thing we talk about outside of recruiting with Nebraska football all the time, and have to, which is this feels like it's a make or break season. And I think it definitely is. If that's the truth for those recruits, it hasn't shown up yet. And on the ratings front, the player ratings, I was looking at the class this morning. This class is very much in range with what others are. From a ratings perspective, it's not it's, they've got 8 4-stars out of those 14 commits, and that's way better. It would be way better than most past Nebraska classes. It's not that, but it's not lower than that either. I think one of the pulled a couple other, so I might be obsessed with attrition, and I think this is fading because it's all getting jumbled up in this new world of transfer portal and early signing day, et cetera. But since I have all this information, I went and looked at some of it this morning, and I think, to start this, you kind of asked, what does it mean to be this far ahead for Nebraska? And one of the big things has been that in the past, when I looked at this, the players, so I looked at the attrition from, does it matter how far away from Lincoln they are? And it does. Doesn't matter when they commit, how soon, how late. And that's a factor. And doesn't matter how highly rated they are. You know, the high 4-star player in the transfer portal era is going to have way more suitors than the 2-star who, you know, was a walk-on until you all of a sudden had some room at the end of the day in the class. So that was it. Combined all those things to kind of try and predict, and this is all very loose, like try to predict, you know, how likely are these players to leave. So 2011 to 2021, 42.9% of all Nebraska signees did not finish their career at Nebraska. That's baseline. The model that I came up with, which again is very, very rudimentary, can't express that enough, but it's a starting point. Projected 39.7%. So it underestimated by about 3%, which is 7 players over basically 11 classes. 2022 group, at this point, attrition probability for that group, 40%. Attrition probability for what we have in 2023 so far, 36.1%. And I'll write about this for a recruiting notebook this week. It's a little easier to see when you've got it lay out rather than try to talk through it. But that's one big benefit, because the sweet spot for Nebraska has been since 2011, the entire Big Ten era, is you get these commits during the summer. They're less likely, they're more likely to finish their careers at Nebraska, even than the guys that you get like a Cam Jurgens who might commit 2 years out. Now, Cam Jurgens finished his career at Nebraska. I don't count leaving for the draft as attrition. But even those guys where they're committed for a super long time, have a lot of time to kind of rethink a decision. Guys that commit basically during the season in the lead up to signing day, that becomes, it can be a good thing for a person like Malachi Coleman, who you mentioned, who's, you know, been kind of upfront with that process the whole way. That those guys can also be we didn't get our 4th and 5th, you know, players we wanted on offense. So now we're throwing out some offers to the next people on our board. And it just becomes, you don't have enough time, I think, to really get to know where you're going and the coaches you're going to play for. So I do think there's a very real advantage to being this far ahead, or at least there has been in the past for Nebraska.
And I will say, because I talked about this in Sunday's recruiting notebook, for anyone who is interested, you can go check that out. So when you look at the commits by position, Nebraska has 1 quarterback in its class, 3 wide receivers, 3 offensive linemen, 1 tight end, 1 defensive lineman, 2 edges now, and 2 linebackers. So when you look at this and kind of look at like what could Nebraska still be looking at, where is maybe an area that needs to be a focus, I do believe that they are going to be looking for a running back for this class. I understand Nebraska's roster is very young at running back, but when we talk about attrition and the potential of like anyone moving on or somebody's career not panning out as, you know, you expect it to or hope it to, it's one of those things where the way I explained it on Twitter was, is running back a do or die position in this class? No, because they have 13 players on the roster right now, and most of them are very young. I think I said 2 are juniors, no seniors. The rest are freshmen, redshirt freshmen, and sophomores, with the majority, I think 8 are freshmen and redshirt freshmen. So you do have a lot of youth. But with that said, it's one of those things where you really don't want to let a class go by where you don't grab at least somebody. Nebraska has lost out on 2 of its identified top prospects at running back in, you know, the last month. But I still don't think it's a place where Nebraska needs to panic because of where it's at right now with this class. Knowing that they're so far ahead in certain areas, they have the time to still be selective. They still have the time to try to build those relationships to find the right player. But it does start to become a little bit more, do you still go after that high school recruit as you get further into the season, or do you maybe then turn to the transfer portal at that point? Because, you know, if you're not building those relationships as strongly and they could ultimately result in attrition or not finding the right person, do you just go take anyone at running back? And I don't think Nebraska wants to do that either. So that is a position, as you're kind of looking at this group come together, I was particularly interested and brought up, and it was interesting watching reaction because people were like, I don't think a running back is needed. And my answer to that was, no, I actually don't either. I don't think they need a running back, but I would be absolutely shocked if Applewhite said, yes, I'm okay going a class without bringing somebody in. The question that I just have now is, are they able to establish that relationship with the person that they want in time? Or do they maybe say, let's just focus on the transfer portal? But that is one position when you look at the breakdown, I'm like, they don't have anyone at running back yet. But it's not a panic situation. Like, that is not what I'm implying. They're not in a panic situation. It's just an area to observe with how far they are ahead in these other spots. They can put a little bit more time and energy into identifying the next running back or two that they might want to go after because of how far ahead they are.
Yeah. If I had to build a recruiting strategy for today's game, like, it would be hard for me to not take someone outside of specialists, not take someone in almost any position, just because, like, Nebraska has always had to deal with attrition more so, I believe, than some of its peer schools. But now it's just, you just have to count on it. Like, with the ease of departure via the transfer portal, you just have to bank on it. And I think, when you're setting your board in those early stages, I would almost want to know of, like, okay, here's where we think we are at running back. We've got room for one. Here's the top of the list. Here's like maybe tier 2, where if we totally strike out on those guys, but I would literally like set a line at which point we determine it's probably, we'll just do better off in the transfer portal, even not knowing what's going to be out there when it comes time to look. And it's kind of the reality now, but you're right. I think so much of this, and I think it was the case pre-transfer portal, and it's even bigger now. The how many guys you can kind of set off to the side, and Nebraska's got 14 commits now. You still factor in, okay, maybe we lose one or two of those for whatever reason. It's just how it goes during the season. But however much you can set aside and be like, yeah, we feel like we got that part pretty well locked in. It's a huge advantage because there are just so many more variables.
It's going to be something look, we've said this so many times and we've had similar statements in videos before. We're like, there's so much to watch and so much. If you're somebody who likes recruiting, you're not going to be bored. There's a lot to still come, a lot to be, excited about. I think what we are seeing right now is kind of a combination of a lot of success of new coaches and their recruiting strategy, which is paying off in many ways. Now, what that means, I always joke, I can already hear the comments of, we'll see what happens on in a game on the field. 100% respect that. That is a big piece of this too. There's a lot of games to be played, and that is going to ultimately determine the outcome of this recruiting class in the end. But for now, you kind of have to be feeling pretty good if you're a Nebraska fan of what some of these new coaches have been able to do with building this class up, and also what Nebraska has been able to do in state. There's so many pieces of this discussion that we can jump in on, and we will continue having these conversations. So here's what we're going to do, because we could sit here and talk for an hour about all the little components and pieces of, well, what about those offensive line commits? What are they actually going to be able to do? Or what about the in-state? There's so many pieces, but we can't take an hour unless that's what you want. But we'd love it if you'd keep the conversation going in the comments. Leave questions if you want us to address something. We'll be back next Monday with even more. I will have more on this particular topic in the recruiting notebook tonight, 6 p.m. Central at hailvarsity.com. So plan to head there. We'll just dive into more specifics on what is this class breakdown? What is going on? Who's to credit for all of it? And I think, these are conversations that are going to have to take place through the season, because like I said, if you're a recruiting fan, you're not going to get bored. There's a lot to dive into here. And I'm going to make Brandon join me for for as long as we can, trying to dive into what all of this means.
Happy to do that.
Perfect. Well, again, recruiting notebook, 6 p.m. Central at Hail Varsity. That actually goes live Sunday through Thursday, 6 p.m. Central at hailvarsity.com. So just appointment reading, check it out. We will be back next week with even more. So again, keep leaving those comments, questions, and we appreciate you being here and watching. We will talk to you later.